Some of the worst things in my life never even happened. Mark Twain. I'm not saying anything about war or hoax for now. I need to show you why from 1939 many European and Japanese cities had to be demolished and rebuilt. It was the biggest socio-economic program in history, and yet you've never heard of it. It's not talked about and doesn't even have a name, because something else big was apparently going on at the same time. In the 1930s, huge numbers of Europeans worked the land. In a lot of southern and eastern European countries, over 3/4 of the population worked the land. In 1938 came the world's first, more affordable, mass-produced, self-propelled combine harvester, the Massey No. 20. Grain harvesting was revolutionised. Small farms who still couldn't afford one would get together, form a cooperative and buy one to share and work on their farms in turn. Or they'd lease one, or just rent one plus driver at harvest time. Not only were they affordable by these methods, farms could not afford not to have one, and now they were being mass-produced. Mechanisation over the last century increased food production in the USA 12 times. This has enabled the world to be fed easily, but also led to crazy supply management, such as UK and US farmers being paid not to farm, maybe other countries too. It's not advertised. I forget what the scheme is called now in the UK, something about the environment. Farmers are paid if they let their fields return to nature, i.e. not farm them. The mechanisations meant no more jobs in the country, millions out of work, and going to the city to look for jobs. In Europe, that's mainly the capital city, because in Europe the capital city has historically been much bigger and more important than any other. But the cities weren't ready. Old low-density accommodations had to be demolished, and new accommodations had to be built, high-rise mainly, to make use of space, because the cities were going to gain a huge amount of population. This wasn't an overnight thing. It was to take place over many years, but it had to happen. Most of the working class houses were private rental at this time, and the term slum landlord described a private landlord that didn't spend on repairs, and this was common. The change to council flats proved to be a massive blessing for those that rented. Fundamentally, the landlord changed from the slumlord to the local council, the name for local government in the UK. If you read from people who actually moved into these blocks in the 40s, 50s and 60s, and not read from the wokest sociologists, the tenants say it was the best thing that ever happened to them. The flats were well designed, much warmer, much more space, not massive space, but an intelligent use of space. Large kitchens and lounges where you spent most of your time, and small bedrooms and bathrooms. Another forced change was roads. Cars were spreading, like the combine and other farm machinery, based on increasing affordability, advancing tech, the advancing reliability and horsepower of the internal combustion engine. The planners knew that in the 40s to the 70s, the majority of the population would buy a car. That meant widening existing roads or building new roads, stables converted to garages, and people being able to live relatively distant from their workplace. The cities would not be broken up by multi-lane highways like this. They would remain walkable, and this would be achieved by increasing public transport and a lot of new public transport. This gave rise to the commuter. A lot more people would be living in the cities now, but also a lot would be living outside and commuting into the cities for the first time. Increased use of electricity, phone lines, water and sewage pipes meant that many roads and pavements had to be dug up for installation. So why wasn't the New World demolished and rebuilt? Let's look at the English-speaking New World: Canada, USA, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. two main reasons. In Europe, the capitals were historically important and much larger than other cities, and were going to bear the brunt of the emptying of the countryside. But the New World had lots of similar-sized cities and towns, more spread out, and were less dependent on their capitals. In none of those 5 countries I mentioned were the capitals the biggest cities. The many equal-sized cities would diffuse the influx from the countryside compared to Europe. Also, New World cities didn't have to be demolished and rebuilt because, relative to Europe, they were low density, more space, less people. Just like Europe, new house standards were much improved. They had a bigger electrical input from the mains and electrical sockets in the walls, no more having to use the low voltage ceiling light sockets for all the new electrical appliances. There are also new telephone lines. However, the old houses didn't need to be demolished. New land was more available in Europe, and blocks of houses with the new standards were just built on new land, and the old blocks were left as they were, the owners free to sell or upgrade if desired. I'll talk of European exceptions later, but for countries like the UK and Germany, hundreds of thousands of private homes and businesses and roads had to be destroyed, and it had to be done quickly. Massive disruption. How to avoid civil unrest, endless demonstrations and riots, and endless court cases? Well, just don't talk about demolition squads. Much simpler if the British people were told the destruction was by the Luftwaffe, and the German people were told the destruction was by the RAF and the USAF. As for Japan, that needed demolition and rebuilding too, but the Japanese, before the demolition, had to be evacuated out of sight of their town. They couldn't be told to tape down their curtains. Their houses were entirely built of wood. An officially started fire would sweep through all of them very quickly, and that's what happened. The morning after the fire, they were led back to their cities and shown what the American bombs did. Bombs, always in inverted commas, of course. In Hiroshima and Nagasaki, any brick or concrete building, bridges, roads survived, which they wouldn't have done if the atomic bomb was real. But the cities were brought down by fire, and fire alone, just like all the other Japanese cities. No bombs, either conventional or pretend atomic bombs. All the so-called bombs that fell on the UK only fell on something that needed to come down or needed to be dug up. And I've had a little look at Europe, and that's the same what I see there. There are thousands of so-called bomb sites. That means the probability of all the so-called bombs by chance hitting the objects that were earmarked to be demolished are millions to one. But that is exactly what happened. Even if it was a real war, why has no historian written about this extraordinary coincidence? The bombs, in inverted commas, were demolition squads, getting rid of the old to make way for the new. Millions to one against it being a coincidence means that it wasn't a coincidence. It was planned, and the war was a hoax. But a lifetime of war films and war documentaries, etc., have powerfully brainwashed people. And scientists have actually been trained to be unscientific, at least since Einstein. I want to make a video about that. They believe in stories now, not what they can actually see. London had a curfew during the Blitz. You couldn't walk the streets at night while the demolition squads worked. You were either sleeping in the underground train station, or if you were a child, you were often sent to live in country areas or abroad. The New World needed people, and most would decide to stay after the duration. More opportunities, cheap land. Or if you were still in your homes, you had to have your curtains closed and then taped to the wall at night time. The police would walk by checking this. You were told it was to stop the Luftwaffe seeing your house lights from 30,000 feet up. I always thought this was ridiculous. But it was really to stop you looking out and seeing that there were no planes, no bombs, but just British demolition squads. Demolition squads operating under electric lights at night time to dramatically limit the number of unwanted viewers. But thousands of people would have still seen what was really happening, and many probably went to the BBC and Times newspapers, not understanding the media, as most still don't. The shill movement likes to say, spread the truth and there'll come a tipping point in awareness. But awareness of hoaxes goes up and down. The biggest awareness is usually when it's actually happening and just after. Apollo may be an exception because it's pushed so much. But I know that polls, which seem to be accurate after 9/11, said that New York was the only place in the world where the majority didn't believe the government. New York was like a miniature World War II, and thousands of New Yorkers were on the streets or had friends on the streets at the time. But that actually awareness went down over time. I don't know if it's still over half now. The non-player character, NPC, likes to say a hoax can't be done because it would only take one person to spill the beans. But that's ridiculous because who would believe them? And who would listen? I've said why the less population-dense countries didn't need demolition. But what about the dense European countries? The exceptions. Why wasn't Spain demolished and rebuilt? Well, actually it was. It had just had its own 6-year civil war and was already being massively rebuilt. I suggest that the Spanish Civil War hoax was a practice run for the World War II hoax, which came about immediately after. Why wasn't Switzerland demolished and rebuilt? Well, they would have never had millions of farm workers laid off by combines. Only 10% of Switzerland is arable land, and much of that is not suitable for combines. Small, hilly farms, more suitable for cows. The official numbers of World War II deaths has constantly changed in my lifetime because they're not real numbers, so have no solidity. If you look superficially at the whole picture, you may think, well, it's millions dead and it was quick and brutal, bound to be mistakes in recording. But actually the recording of births and deaths in civilization has always been meticulously done. In the UK, the parish, the area covered by a church, used to be the smallest unit of trusted unofficial government, and thus used to be the smallest unit of record. Whatever the smallest unit of record is, it is they that add together to make up the overall national numbers. Easy to convince soldiers they're in a real war. The radio is on all the time, lying about raids, battles, deaths, the advance or retreat of forces. The soldiers would sometimes get to hear gunfire, pretend bombs, but no ordnance ever entered their camp. They'd also hear their commanding officer hoaxing them about neighbouring units being attacked. It was just their unit that was luckily never attacked. No bomb hit any building of historical significance anywhere, which of course would happen in a real total war. Because what better way to demoralise the opponent? Destroy everything that makes them different, unique. Two main motivations for this hoax: the advance of mankind, that needed a lot of demolition and rebuilding, and the hoaxing of mankind for reasons we can only guess. Just one hoax among hundreds. We do need challenges to overcome, however. It's part of our design. Surviving danger and horror in an unknowingly safe simulation. There were other things that the fake war accomplished, such as partial population relocation and the communism experiment. The New World needed Europeans at that time. Mega hoaxes are actually very easy to pull off if they go against what the victim has been brainwashed with all their lives. This ease is what people don't understand. The airwaves, newspapers, books are swamped with just one opinion, the official one. Suppose this video of mine was professionally done. Would it convince more people of the hoax? Unlikely, maybe a few more. Suppose it was put on primetime TV. Well, more would see the light, but not huge numbers. People would just think of it as a maverick production, maverick producer. The only thing that would convince people is constant day and night documentaries and discussions about this hoax and all the hoaxes in our hoax world, because that is exactly what would happen if the world was closer to how the brainwashed see it. So it's absurd when the NPC says it would only take one to spill the beans. Not that we should worry about it, the gods decide. It's just good to understand why people think the way they do. The few shills on YouTube that talk about fake war, and good for them, say that war used to be real but not now. But this is just part of the fear porn meme they push, that an evil group of men, Illuminati, Freemasons, secretly took over the world, so now as they have total control, they don't need real wars. But this is nonsense. Most likely wars have always been fake throughout human history. The intelligent design runs things, not the Illuminati. See my videos 43 to 45. Any video I mention will be listed in the description below. The complexity, the psychology of our hoax realm is well beyond the means of man. It's from the intelligent design, God, whatever you want to call it, or them. And they must want a few of us at least to discover it. That's why there's a shill movement with occasional disclosures. But it's not easy. The main purpose of the shill movement is to spread fear. But there are also often clues for us within the hoax itself. For example, the Museum of Military History in Vienna has the car in which Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated. We are told this is what started World War I. The registration plate spells the date when peace was declared 4 years later. A for armistice, 11 of the 11, 18. Another incredible coincidence. Does the way that we are designed need pretend wars? We have some kind of enjoyment of war glory within us. We enjoy war films or computer games, or more broadly, films, games with danger, with good and bad. Good has no meaning without bad. We naturally seek out good, work towards good. We want to feel progression. But also, in war, in the theory of it, you can see the best of humanity, brave, selfless actions. But it's all without any danger. In a stable, perfect world, progression would have no meaning. The way we are designed means that we couldn't handle extreme stability. See my video 28, Why Heaven Would Be Hell. I've not mentioned the people who directed the artistic side of World War II hoax. They also directed the Apollo program 20 years later, the Apollo program hoax, I should say. We are always given people we know who, in disguise, often purposely feeble disguise, act the pretend roles in the hoax. But before I discuss that, there were no uploads from me from August 2024 to June 2026. And I want to get some motivation to improve on that. The best way I came up with is positive reinforcement in the form of tips from you. If you like my videos, please buy me a coffee. Permanent link under the channel heading on the home page. It's pretty lonely making these videos, and the odd £2 tip will incentivize me to keep going. As far as I know, I'm the only person doing this honest, non-fear porn analysis. If you know another, please tell me in the comments. I think most will agree that once you discover things are not as they seem, then that becomes the only game in town. Nothing is more interesting, and everything else pales into insignificance. My name is Paul, I live in UK. I don't normally do videos to camera, but you can see me in some old videos, 23, 28 and the end of 31. Some videos I would make if incentivized by Buy Me a Coffee, Disney, Hitler, Cronkite and the direction of the World War II and Apollo hoaxes. Also to be made are we gods or pets? If gods, we must have been dramatically, temporarily, mentally degraded and wiped, and with a wiped memory for our current experience. Like Arnold, who had his memory wiped for his new experience in Total Recall. Also to be made, God's Little Helpers, about the actors who multi-role and also organise hoaxes. There have been lots of sci-fi films about human-looking beings living amongst us, like Invasion of the Body Snatchers and They Live. They're trying to tell us something with these films, another clue. But unlike the films, I believe it's all benign. Nobody dies, nobody gets hurt. God's little helpers are not paid humans. It's a far more solid setup than that. And they must be at a higher spiritual level than us. They never give themselves away. Human communications, even if long distance, start with the mouth vibrating air and end with vibrating air hitting the eardrum of the recipient. The communications of God's little helpers with each other must be much more direct than that, and not vulnerable to eavesdropping. End of the fundraising section. It's only going to be in video 46 and video 47 shown here. When you see it for the second time, you can skip past it. It has been disclosed to us who ran both the World War II hoax and the Apollo hoax, but I'm just going to skim over this in this video because it certainly deserves at least one video of its own, which I intend to make. Werner von Braun, who was head of the pretend Nazi rocket program and later the pretend USA rocket program, here he is meeting Hitler for the first time, his old friend. As part of the hoax lie game, famous people known to us play the part of pretend characters in a hoax. Remember Voltaire, God is a comedian playing to an audience that is too afraid to laugh. See my actor-based reality playlist. It's an essential concept to understand. I'll link it below. Also check out this channel for the actors who played the leading Nazis. One warning of Schillery about this channel: he pretends that there were actually real Nazi leaders, unnamed and hiding behind the actors. The actors just hiding the real leaders in a real war. Which is nonsense. They were only actors. Remember, disclosure is wonderful, but, and you should know the game by now, it always has to be filtered. My next video, number 47, will be the aforementioned actor-based reality video, and that's going to be made whatever. And finally, if you like this video, see video 41, Laughing Inappropriately at War. And remember, God is a comedian playing to an audience that is too afraid to laugh. Thanks for watching. See you next time.